Here are the modal double-faced cards. So the first one is Halvar, God of Battle. So on the front side, he has a 4 mana, 4/4, and he has creatures you control that are enchanted or equipped have double strike. That includes himself. At the beginning of each combat, you may attach target aura or equipment attached to a creature you control to target creature you control. So basically what it says is that you can, as you go to combat, move your auras and equipments around in a way that might benefit you better in combat. So if you like had something with an aura on it, but then it's like not actually that good anymore, because you can't quite attack, put it on a bigger creature so that it gets through. And again, like anything going on to Halvar is now going to turn Halvar into an at least 4/4 double striker, and possibly bigger if the equipment or the aura itself boosts his size. Halvar is an absolute windmill slam for his pick. Let's take a look at the flip side, though. So the flip side is Sword of the Realms. So this is a 2-mana equipment that equips for 2. Equipped creature has +2/+0 and has vigilance, and then when it dies, return it to its owner's hand. So basically, whatever this sword is on is pseudo-immortal, and gets a +2/+0 and vigilance boost. And it's a very reasonable and cheaply costed equipment. So yeah, I'm a big fan of this card. Like, this is an absolute windmill slam. Play it in your, like, pick this first every time. And yeah, definitely good enough for Brawl, and probably good enough for EDH. The funny thing with the gods is that I don't know that they're actually great as their own commanders, because I don't know. My gut says, I mean, some of them are probably fine, but generally speaking, I actually think a lot of these are better than 99. And I don't really know even why I have that, but that's sort of my gut feeling. So that's just what I'm going with. But either way, definitely good enough for EDH. The next one is Redain, God of the Worthy. So this is a 2-mana, 2/3 flying vigilance creature. It has snowlands your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped. So like randomly snowland hate, which like makes sense. There's got to be some downside to playing snowlands because there really just isn't otherwise. But yeah, snowland hate. And then also non-creature spells your opponents cast with converted mana cost 4 or greater, cost 2 more to cast. So Gadog Teague, this is not, but it is notably mono white. This is a decent little hate bear. It's not exciting or particularly powerful, but it is solid. And then the flip side is Valkymira, Protector's Shield. So this is a 4-mana legendary artifact that says if a source an opponent controls would deal damage to you or a permanent you control, prevent one of that damage. Whenever you or another permanent you control becomes the target of a spell or ability that opponent controls, counter that spell or ability unless its controller pays 1. So basically this is just perma-mana tithing anything that would target you, and also reducing all incoming damage by 1 for each individual source. Kind of an interesting effect. I don't know how good this actually is, but I expect it's better than it plays better than it looks on paper, just because of how much that's going to add up over time. I think this is quite a cool little card. Again, probably good enough to see limited play just based on the fact that it's a 2-mana 2/3 flying vigilance. Like, that's just a good solid body, and it just has the random upside of like hosing some random things your opponent are doing. So again, I think that this is very first pickable. It's not exciting or super good or anything, but it is good and definitely a first pick, I would say. There might be some removal spells that I may pick this over. Like, I might take that Black Foretell removal spell over it or something, but that would be close. And that might come down to how the format shakes out. Our next mythic god is Alrund, God of the Cosmos. So he's a 5-mana 1/1, which is a little bit weird, but he gets +1/+1 for each card in your hand and each foretold card you own in exile. So, you know, if you've got 4 cards in hand, it's a 4/4, and then you've got another thing exiled in foretell, so that's like a 5/5. It's a, so it's going to be of a decent size. You just want to make sure that you're keeping your hand full as much as possible. And then at the beginning of your end step, choose a card type, then reveal the top 2 cards of your library. Put all cards of the chosen type into your hand and the rest on the bottom. So like you can choose land, instant, creature, whatever. And then whatever you reveal that matches that, you get to keep. Which would, of course, then grow him further. Alrund's flip side is Haka, the Whispering Raven. So this is a 2-mana 2/3 flyer. Whenever he deals combat damage to a player, return it to its owner's hand, then scry 2. So the idea is you can play this early on, and yes, when it attacks, it'll bounce back to your hand, but you get to scry 2, and then notably that means that it returns to your hand, enabling you to then potentially cast it as Alrund once you hit that 5-mana threshold. Because Alrund is the better card of the two by a lot, but this basically means that Allrund is actually a 2-drop in your hand that later converts into Allrunds, which is really, really cool. In terms of kind of like the pacing of the card. Again, I believe this is a firm windmill slam in limited, and will likely be very good in Brawl, and probably quite good in EDH as well. Okay, the next one is Cosima, God of the Voyage. So this card is very confusing, so bear with me on this one. This card is real weird. So it's a 3-mana 2/4. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may exile Cosima. So that doesn't actually do anything until the next turn, as you basically untap and then go to your upkeep. So on turn 3, you play Cosima. At the beginning of turn 4, you get the option of exiling Cosima. If you do, it gains whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control. If Cosima is exiled, you may put a voyage counter on it. If you don't, return Cosima to the battlefield with X+1/+1 counters on it and draw X cards, where X is the number of voyage counters on it. So basically what this says is, as of your turn 4, when you play a land, you put a voyage counter on the Cosima. You're definitely not going to want to bring it back right away on that one. And then basically, the more lands you play and the longer you leave her in exile for, she comes back large and draws you a bunch of cards. The longer you wait, it's like, wait, I'm going to do this really cool thing. That being said, I cannot help but feel that this card is like extremely finicky and kind of bizarre. I have a friend who has a deck that I feel like this actually will fit pretty well into, but it's a very bizarre and niche card, which again, I really love because they're not just printing these like uber powerful, this goes in every blue deck type creatures, which I'm thankful for because I like not homogenizing the Commander format. The next one, oh, sorry, not the next card. Let's look at the flip side. So the flip side is the Omen Keel. So this is a legendary vehicle. It costs 2 blue. It costs 1 and a blue to cast. And this says whenever a vehicle you control, so notably this works with other vehicles as well. I don't know how many vehicles you're playing in your random blue landfall deck or whatever. They're very kind of disparate. But anyway, whenever a vehicle you control deals combat damage to a player, that player exiles that many cards from the top of their library. You may play land cards from among those cards for as long as they remain exiled. So basically, at base, this is going to hit your opponent and exile the top 3 cards of their library because it's dealing them 3 damage. If you have other vehicles, great, you exile more cards. Once you've done that, any of the lands so the normal cards that got exiled, they're just gone. Your opponent doesn't get those. That's just gone. But any lands that they exile, you actually get to play them yourself as your land for turn. Although obviously you still have to follow the 1 land per turn rule unless you have something that lets you play multiples. So the idea is that like a lot of these are designed for constructed, where you're going to run multiple copies of Cosima in your deck, and then what you get to do is that you go turn 2, you play the Omen Keel. You play Cosima, like this card as the Omen Keel, and then on turn 3, what you can do is you can actually play Cosima as Cosima, tap it through the Omen Keel, attack with the Omen Keel, exile the top 3 cards. On the following turn, you wind up exiling Cosima, and then you play one of the lands you got from that Omen Keel attack the previous turn and grow your Cosima. So, like, they're actually meant to synergize with each other in terms of, like, this is actually, like, a card, like, this is basically a way to kind of not, this is a way to mitigate drawing multiple legendaries, is having them have 2 very distinct and synergistic sides, because although you can't play 2 copies of Cosima, God of the Voyage, you can play 1 Cosima and 1 Omen Keel, and they will not legend rule each other out, which I think is really interesting. It's a very bizarre card. It's a very complex card, and unfortunately that whole interplay between both sides of it, similar to Halvar actually, where like Halvar getting equipped with the Sword of the Realms would be dope as hell. You can't do that in Brawl or in EDH, because of course you can only, even though they're different faces, they're still counted as the same card for deck building purposes, and so you have to choose one side as you do it. So you lose a lot of the play that these cards have in EDH, but in limited and in standard and whatever else, this is going to be how you want to do that. Now in limited, again, you're probably not also going to have 2 of this. So really, like, the best way to play these cards is not in any of the formats that I'm reviewing them for, which is unfortunate. But I did feel the need to highlight that because of A, how weird of a card this is, but also B, how cool it is when they interact with each other's respective sides. That is actually like really, really cool design and a really excellent and interesting way of mitigating the drawing multiple copies of a legendary downside. All right, so enough about that. The next card is Aegon, God of Death. So it is a 3-mana 6/6 with Death Touch. as you might expect, there is a downside to that. So at the beginning of your upkeep, you have to exile 2 cards from your graveyards, and if you can't, you sack Aegon and draw a card. So honestly, this is like kind of cool, right? Like you cast Aegon, and it's a 6/6 Death Touch blocker at the very least. And then at the beginning of your upkeep, you can exile some cards from your graveyard. That's totally fine. But if you can't, and it is 2 cards, right? Not 2 creature cards. So any cards will do. It doesn't have to be specific types. But even if you can't, you at least get your card back and sacrifice this. I'm so sorry. The burps are real. Flip side is Throne of Death. So it's a single black mana for this It's a legendary artifact. At the beginning of your upkeep, mill a card. And then for 2 and a black, tap, exile a creature card. So this time it is a bit more specific. From your graveyard, draw a card. So again, these cards are synergistic because you can basically play Aegon, and then if he dies, you actually get to, and if you have another one or whatever, you can Throne of Death, you can actually eat your other Aegon or something and draw a card. I've got a commander deck that I'm very interested in playing this in. It's Sidisi, because the cool tech here is that the front face, which is like the face that checks when you mill cards, is a creature. So milling over Aegon with Sidisi will actually count and as a creature, and therefore get you that zombie token. And on the flip side, but then I'm basically never going to cast it as Aegon. I'm always just going to cast it as Throne of Death, because getting to just passively mill a card on my upkeep gives me that many more opportunities to hit a creature and get an extra zombie token out of the Sidisi ability, and it then just has that bonus ability, which is also quite good as well. A lot of like very, very sort of neat little synergy piece there. A big fan of that card. But again, another just really cool, intricate design. I really like the way that they designed the gods for this set. They are not overpowered, but they are strong. They fit into these like very specific strategies. Now, having said that, I do believe that Tergrid is probably the most powerful of any of the gods, including the mythic ones, frankly. Like, this card is really, really good. So let's take a look. 5 mana for a 4/5 with Menace. Already totally reasonable rate. Oh, and I did neglect to say, first pick and draft, first pick and draft, first pick and draft. First pick and draft? Not pickable in draft. This is not a good card for draft. Don't play this in limited. I don't think it's good enough for limited, quite honestly. Moving on. Tergrid, God of Fright. So, yeah, as we said, 5 mana, 4/5 Menace. Already a very decent body. Whenever an opponent sacrifices a non-token permanent or discards a permanent card, you may put that card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. Let that soak in for a second. So anytime that your opponent sacrifices any permanent or discards any permanent, you just get that card for free. It doesn't go to their graveyard. Or sorry, well, it does go to their graveyard, but then you just get it onto your battlefield. So this applies to planeswalkers. This applies to lands. This applies to enchantments, artifacts, just all permanent spells. And you don't have to pay additional mana to do this. Now, obviously, why are they sacrificing? Why are they discarding? You are going to have to like find the second piece of the puzzle to like turn this ability on. But if you are able to make this happen, this is an absurd amount of mana discount. Like, this is a ton of free mana that you're generating at no additional cost. This just sits there and takes their stuff as it dies, which is ludicrous. Now, again, it's not when a creature dies, it says sacrifices, so they specifically need to sacrifice it to do that. But again, there are a lot of ways in black to make your opponent sacrifice creatures, or other permanents for that matter. And again, even easier to make them discard cards in black. So like, that's not a big hoop to jump through. So in and of herself, she doesn't do that much. Like, this can be flavor text, frankly. Like, she might just be a 5 mana 4/5 in limited. But in Commander, in Brawl, I guarantee this is going to be a terrifying card to be staring down. So be careful of that. And then her flip side is her Lantern. 4 mana for a legendary artifact. Tap to make target player lose 3 life unless they sack a non-land permanent or discard a card. So note that, again, if you wind up having multiples of this, I know this doesn't really apply to limited or to Commander, but still, I have to say it because it's really freaking cool. If you have Tergrid and the Lantern, you activate the Lantern and basically force them to choose between losing 3 life or sacrificing a non-land permanent or discarding a card, which you would then get if the Tergrid is in play, which is quite silly. And then, of course, it just has 4 mana untapped Tergrid's Lantern. So this automatically basically wins the game. If you can make infinite mana in black, and it's like not that hard because Cabal Coffers is a card, you can actually just win the game on the spot by basically just going tap, they lose 3 life, or get all their stuff. And then eventually, like, so that you can basically just create a thing where you either like take all their permanents or kill them. It's pretty cool. Like this is like literally like an infinite mana. Like this wins with infinite mana deterministically, which is quite strong. So I do believe that this is like one of the best ones for Commander. It's very scary. It's not that good in EDH or in Limited, I will say. A 5-mana 4/5 menace is on a very reasonable body. I would never say no to it, but it's not like a windmill slam first pick. But oh boy, if you can build around her abilities, it is gonna get gross in there. All right, next we have Valky, the God of Lies. So for 1 and a black, it's a 2/2. When it enters the battlefield, each opponent reveals their hand. For each opponent, exile a creature card they revealed this way until Valky leaves the battlefield. So in this does scale to multiplayer. You get to take something from each of your opponents, but it does have to be a creature, so you can't take anything else. And then for X mana, you can choose a creature card that is exiled with Valky with converted mana cost X, and Valky becomes a copy of that card. So like, let's say, so basically, if Valky entered the battlefield and my opponent had a Birgi, God of Storytelling, it has 3 mana, or 3 CMC, so I could pay 3 and make Valky into a copy of Birgi until end of turn. Or sorry, not even until end of turn. It just becomes a copy of that card. In fact, it literally just becomes a copy of that card. It doesn't even lose. It's not till end of turn, and it doesn't gain this ability. So you basically just make that choice once, and then it's done. That's it. That's the choice. Now, if this dies, then they will get their creature cards back. No, that is notable. And the flip side of this is Tibalt, Cosmic Imposter. Our friend Timbers is back, and arguably better than ever. It's a 7-mana Planeswalker, which is no joke, but it's very strong. So for 7 mana, you get a 5 loyalty Planeswalker. For +2, it exiles the top card of each player's library. For -3, it exiles target artifact or creature. And for -8, it exiles all cards from all graveyards, and you get 3 red mana. Now, why does it do so much exiling, you say? Because as you enter the battlefield, and this may actually be the first time it happens, the enter the battlefield is what actually gives you the emblem. You get an emblem that says, you may play cards exiled with Tibalt Cosmic Imposter, and you may spend mana or mana of any color to cast those cards. So literally anything that Tibalt winds up getting rid of is now fair game for you to play, whether or not Tibalt is on the battlefield, because even if he dies, his emblem will remain, and the cards will remain in exile, which means that's still fair game. So it costs a heck of a lot, but that is mitigated by both the fact that A, if you draw this early in the game, you can always just play it as the Valky God of Lies. You don't need to wait till 7 mana to cast your Tibalt, though you may be tempted to because it's pretty sweet. But again, once it comes down, like, you get paid for doing that. Like, it does a lot of good stuff. That is a bunch of very powerful abilities. Also notably for EDH purposes specifically, because I don't believe there's any such mechanic in Brawl or even Historic Brawl, but Cascade works the way you want it to. So if you play a 3-mana spell with Cascade and Cascade into Valky God of Lies, when that spell goes on the stack, you can actually, oopsie, that's not what I want. You can actually choose, because this is the front half, you can legally Cascade a 3-drop into Valky because it's a 2-drop. But you're right, there is the expertise actually. That is true. But once it's on the stack with Cascade, you can just cast the 7-mana Tibalt off of your 3-mana Cascade spell, which means that you could literally just cast Tibalt for free on turn 3 off of like Shardless Agent or something, which is pretty messed up. Like, that's gotta be one of the stronger things you can do. So that's pretty dang cool. So this card is really nice. I like this card a lot. Next one is Birgi, God of Storytelling. So she's a 3-mana 3/3, and whenever I cast a spell, I add a red mana. Until my end of turn, I don't lose this mana as steps and phases end. So I can cast some spells in my main phase, then go to combat, and I still have this red mana. Now, why is that important? Because creatures you control can boast twice during each of your turns rather than once. Because normally, boast is a one-time trigger. But she allows for 2 boast triggers, and notably, generates mana that allows you to pay for your boast triggers, which is kind of cool. The flip side is Harnfell. Harnfell? I think it would be, if it was Hjarn, it would have a J. So let's say Harnfell, the Horn of Bounty. Very, very different than what the front half does. They don't really synergize all that well together, but they are cool. This one says discard a card and then exile the top 2 cards of your library. You may play those cards this turn. So this is very classic red impulsive draw, as they call it. You get rid of a random land and temporarily draw 2, and then you get to cast those spells this turn if you're able to. Otherwise, they'll just stay exiled. But this is basically a really interesting way for red to generate card advantage. Also, notably, I was talking earlier about how Foretell works really well with Chainer. This card also works really well with Chainer because you can discard a card and then exile the top 2 cards, and if they're creature cards, then Chainer is going to see them coming into play from exile, not your hand, and give them haste, which is quite cool. So I feel like that deck, like Loki, got juiced pretty nicely. Loki. But yeah, so that's that. The next one is Taralf, God of Fury, our very own 4 stand-in. So he's 4 mana for a 5/4 trample, and whenever a creature or planeswalker an opponent controls is dealt excess non-combat damage, non-combat being important, so combat damage will not apply. This is basically burn spells only, and fight spells for that matter, but basically burn spells and fight spells. Whenever a creature or planeswalker an opponent controls is dealt excess non-combat damage, Taralf deals damage equal to the excess to any other target than that permanent. So basically, I have your opponent has a 3/3 and you have a 5 damage burn spell. You send the 5 damage burn spell at the 3/3, and then Taralf sees that 2 extra damage went to waste, and then he gets to send that damage at like your opponent's 2/2, or just at their face, or like hit a planeswalker for 2. Basically, no burn damage will go to waste as long as Taralf is on the battlefield, which is pretty darn cool. Notably, I think that this synergizes really well with that giant we were looking at earlier, the uncommon one that basically lets you draw a card anytime you deal excess damage. So that's pretty cool. That would definitely go. This would definitely go in that deck. Another deck that I think Taralf is very good in is the I definitely don't remember the name of it, but it's the green red legend from Jumpstart that's basically fight tribal. Because, of course, fight spells do count as dealing damage and potentially excess damage. And so Taralf in that deck, I think, is really, really good. So those would be 2 places to look out for that. Again, it's a 4-mana 5/4 trample. You're always just going to windmill slam this in limited. Whether or not you have burn spells is just going to be very good. I forgot to say, yeah, Birgi, I think, is fine if you're in a Boast deck, but honestly, I don't think I'd play her in Limited otherwise. I don't really see the Harnfell being good in Limited. That just feels very slow and very dirtily. And then, yeah, Birgi will be good in your red aggressive Boast deck, but that's about it. So she's not necessarily, like, she's probably first pick a bull, but she's not a Windmill Slam. Taralf is a Windmill Slam. Flip side is Toralf's Hammer, of course. You know, what is Thor without his hammer? A creature has 2 in red. Tap, unattach the hammer. It deals 3 damage to any target, and then return it to its owner's hand. So it does the boomerang hammer thing, right? We've all seen Marvel. We've all seen Avengers, Thor, whatever. You know what this means. Throw the hammer, deal 3 damage, then it comes back to your hand. And the cool thing is, that means you either get to, once the hammer comes back to your hand, you either get to recast it as Taralf, or you can just recast it as the hammer again. And then the only condition on this is that equipped creature gets +3/+0, but only as long as it's legendary. So this doesn't actually do anything besides this ability, unless the creature is attached to his legendary. But again, it's 2 mana to play, 2 mana to equip. This card is extremely serviceable, extremely reasonable. Again, 100% Windmill Slam this, and probably very cool in a few interesting decks in EDH. All right, next is Esseka, God of the Tree. So she's a green legend, but JK, she's actually a 5-color legend because, spoilers, her flip side is 5 colors. She's a 3-mana 1/4 with Vigilance, and she adds 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. She also grants all other legendary creatures you control the ability to have Vigilance and tap to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. So she is just the queen of mana fixing. She's the queen of legendary mana fixing, and that is all she wants to do all the time. I don't think this card is particularly good in Limited, especially because it like literally is just like a weird mana dork. I don't know how many other legendary creatures you're planning on having, but it probably won't be that many. But she's definitely very, very cool as a brawl and a EDH commander, or an inclusion in other decks. I think this would go really well in a Sisei deck, the 5-color Sisei. It definitely goes well in that Corona, the False God fight, or she probably could be the general for a world tree deck. I mean, obviously that makes sense, right? She's literally Esseka, god of the tree, the world tree. So it makes sense that the world tree would synergize well with a 5-color commander, considering it's also a 5-color land because of the color identity on it. Let's take a look at the flip side. The flip side is the Prismatic Bridge. At the beginning of your upkeep, reveal cards from the top of your library for 5 mana. So one of each color. Wooburg. At the beginning of your upkeep, reveal the cards from the top of your library until you reveal a creature or planeswalker. Put that card onto the battlefield and the rest on the bottom. So basically, just every upkeep, you just get a free creature or walker. That's it. Just lots of good card advantage, basically. It's not inexpensive. It does cost 5 mana to set up, but once that's rolling, you're just going to get a free creature or walker every single turn of the game for the rest of the game, or until it blows up. Not a great card for limited. Like, really, really just not a great card for limited. You're never going to cast the Prismatic Bridge. Don't do it. It's a bad idea. And the Esseka side is just like, whatever. But a great card for Commander and EDH for sure. Next is Yorn, God of Winter. This is our Snow Commander. This is our official Snow Commander. Technically, we have a couple others, but this is like, I think, going to be the one that rules them all realistically. So this is actually, despite the front side being only a green creature, the flip side is a black and blue card, which means this is actually a Sultai Commander. But finally, it's a Sultai Commander that isn't just mostly broken on its face. So on its face, it is a 3-mana 3/3, and it says whenever it attacks, untap each snow permanent you control. And that does include itself because it is a snow permanent. So if you have an entirely snow mana base, then you've sort of built yourself a weird, like, Seedborn Muse, which is definitely a very potentially powerful effect, not to count other permanents that are also snow that might be tapped for whatever reason. So definitely a pretty good thing to be doing. The flip side is Cauldring the Rime Staff. So it's a 3-mana artifact, and it says, tap, you may play target snow permanent card from your graveyard this turn, and if you do, it enters tapped. So this basically just lets you buy back fallen snow permanents at no additional cost besides tapping it. Which again is a very powerful effect in my opinion. Notably, again, these do somewhat combo, because if you attack, you can basically activate the Cauldring effect. So if you have multiples, you can activate Cauldring and then attack with Yorn, and that'll untap the Cauldring, which means you get another shot at using the artifact. So that's kind of cool, little cross synergy there. Again, will not come up in limited in limited or in Commander, unfortunately, but still a cool little nod there. I don't know how high of a pick this actually is supposed to be in limited. Like, at the end of the day, a 3-mana 3/3 Vigilance is like not particularly impressive. Like, obviously it could be more than that, but it's not much more than that a lot of the time, I suspect. I don't think this is a very high pick, but it is a high synergy pick, and if you feel like just really trying to build the snow deck, this is a pretty cool way to do that. But it's not a windmill slam by any stretch of the imagination. This is just gonna be like a cool meme deck, I think, that could actually be good, but is not gonna be like extremely exciting. Also, there's a bunch of little adorable shoats or weasels or whatever, and I kind of love it. All right, next one is Kolvori, God of Kinship. 4 mana for a 2/4. But as long as you control 3 or more legendary creatures, Kolvori gets +4/+2 and has Vigilance. So basically, and that includes herself. So basically, as long as you have 2 other legendary creatures, she's just a 4-mana 6/6, which is like pretty good. And then her ability is 2 and tap. Look at the top 6 cards of your library, reveal a legendary creature card from among them, and then put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So this card is sweet. There's not really much else to say about that. It reminds me a lot of Reki in terms of like it's a mono green Legends Matter card. It definitely makes me very tempted to try to build a Reki deck. And just have it just be mono green legendaries, which kind of sounds sweet. But yeah, a cool card with like a good card advantage engine. It's not ever going to be a thing in limited. Do not play this card in limited. It's just never going to get you to where you want to go. But a very cool build around for both Brawl and Commander, once again. The flip side is the Ringheart Crest. It's quite unexciting, ultimately. But it's not bad. So this is a 2-mana legendary artifact. When it ETBs, you choose a creature type, and then you tap to add green mana, but only to spend it on a given creature type or a legendary creature spell. So it can cast any legendary regardless of type, or any legendary creature regardless of type, or some sort of tribal whatever the heck thing, right? So this would actually work okay in your elf deck or your elemental deck or whatever. Just have green for your elementals, but it's a little worse. It's not the best or anything, but again, it is a 2-mana rock, and there are not a lot of 2-mana rocks in Brawl. So, like, honestly, it's not bad just on that merit alone. Again, not a high pick in limited. I would definitely pass this over for a lot of stuff, but very, very cool for very cool for the purposes of Commander. I'm gonna very, very easily, like, quickly skip over these. Basically, these are dual lands, right? We've seen these already. It's the other half of the cycle from Battle for Zendikar, or not Battle for Zendikar, from Zendikar Rising. They're basically going to be good in your 2-color decks and kind of bad everywhere else in my personal experience. So if you have a 2-color deck and these lands are the ones you were waiting for, awesome. Congratulations, you have more 2-color lands. If you're playing a monocolor deck, well, you're not allowed. And if you're playing a tricolor deck or 5-color deck, honestly, I think you can do better. But they are not bad budget options. And that's going to be it. That is my full and comprehensive review of all the cards in Kaldheim. Took me a lot longer than I thought it would, like a lot longer, but it turns out there's a lot of cards and I talk a lot. I think if I do this again, I am likely to probably skim over a lot of the random commons and everything for limited purposes and just kind of highlight the cards that I think are actually noteworthy and probably save myself a lot of time in the process. But hey, I've never done this before, so, you know, had to start somewhere. But yeah, I hope everyone enjoyed watching. If you watched live, awesome. I really appreciate it. And if you're watching the VODs for this, then I hope you learned something out of it. And I hope that you'll come and check me out in person next time. But until then, have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you next time. Cheers.